Cinderella from Girl to Queen. Cinderella as Queen. On a quiet morning in the palace, the sun rose slowly above the towers and its light slid across the tall windows. Inside, everything was calm. The corridors were still quiet and the air smelled like morning. Cinderella woke early as she usually did. She loved these first moments of the day when the palace had not yet filled with voices and footsteps. She sat by the window and looked out toward the garden stretching far below. As she watched the leaves sway gently, she remembered something important. In a few days, it would be the prince's birthday. Not a grand celebration, just a day she wanted to feel special. Cinderella smiled. She wasn't thinking of gold gifts. She was thinking of something else, something that would bring joy without being loud. She dressed quickly and stepped out into the palace. The stone walls held coolness, and sunbeams painted bright patches on the floor. As she walked, Cinderella kept thinking, what would make that day truly good? What kind of surprise would warm the heart without turning into noise? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew one thing. She would find it. And with that thought, Cinderella began her day, not yet knowing how pleasant the journey toward a small but important surprise would be. Cinderella went out into the gardens where the morning air was fresh and light. She walked slowly along the path between the flowers and noticed the gardener bending over the rose bushes. "Good morning," she said with a smile. The gardener looked up and bowed slightly. "Good morning, he hesitated, then added, Cinderella." She laughed softly. "You can just call me Cinderella. Tell me what flowers bloom most beautifully this season." "The roses," he answered. "They always try the hardest when an important day is coming." Cinderella stopped beside a rose and touched it carefully. "And what do you think makes a day truly important?" The gardener thought for a moment. "When someone remembers you," he said, not with noise, but with care. Cinderella nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking too." A little farther, by the fountain, she met one of her friends from court who was arranging flowers in a vase. "You look thoughtful," her friend said. "Are you planning something?" "Tell me," Cinderella asked, "what makes you happiest on your birthday?" Her friend smiled. "When someone sits beside me and says, 'I'm glad you exist.'" "I'm glad you exist," Cinderella repeated quietly. "That's beautiful." She looked up at the sky, then back at the flowers. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said aloud, as if speaking to herself too. As she walked back toward the palace, something began forming in her mind. Not the whole surprise yet, only its first part. It would be wonderful. It would come from the heart, for the one she loved. Later that same day, Cinderella walked through the corridor and met the prince. He carried a few scrolls under his arm and looked busy. But when he saw her, he stopped. "Hey, just the person I was looking for," he said. "Do you have a moment?" "I do," Cinderella replied. "What's going on?" "I was thinking of going into the city tomorrow," the prince said. "I should see how things are going, but I'm wondering if I should postpone it." Cinderella raised her eyebrows. "Why postpone it?" He thought for a moment. "I don't know," he said. "I just feel like I should stay at the palace these days." Cinderella smiled, pretending to be surprised. "Interesting. And how do you usually decide things like that?" "I listen to my first thought," he said. "And it tells me not to rush." Cinderella nodded. "Sometimes the first thought is the best one." He looked at her carefully. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked with a smile, "as if you know something I don't." "I'm just thinking," Cinderella said, "that sometimes the nicest things aren't planned too much." "So you think I should stay?" he asked. "I think whatever you decide will be right," Cinderella said, "but if you stay, you might be surprised." She laughed softly. "You always talk like you know the end of the story," he said. "I just like the story to happen," she replied. He looked at her again, then nodded. "Fine, I'll stay." Cinderella watched him go. "Good," she whispered to herself. "The first part is in place." Later that day, Cinderella went down to the quieter part of the palace where few people usually came. The kitchens were there, a place where something was always happening and where conversations were never too formal. "Hello, Cinderella," the cook said without stopping her stirring. "You rarely come down at this time." "I know," Cinderella said, "but today I need advice." The cook looked at her with interest. "That sounds serious. What is it?" "If you had to make a surprise for someone who doesn't like loud celebrations," Cinderella said, "what would you choose?" The cook thought. I wouldn't make a big party, she said. I'd choose something that makes him smile without putting him in the center of attention. For example? Cinderella asked. For example, his favorite food, the cook replied, or a place that reminds him of something good. Cinderella nodded. So it doesn't have to be big. Exactly, the cook said. Big things often get tiring. A little farther on, Cinderella met the palace steward checking lists. Do you have a minute? She asked. For you, always, he said. Is there a place in the palace that isn't used much but is pleasant? Cinderella asked. He smiled. There is a small room in the old wing. No one goes there unless they want quiet. That sounds perfect, Cinderella said. Exactly what I'm looking for. When she returned to her room, she sat down and said aloud, Good, not big, not loud, just well done. This time the plan was no longer only an idea, it was becoming real. She looked at the calendar and frowned. 2 days left, she said. All right, we start now. She stepped into the corridor and called the first servant she saw. Can you help me with a small room in the old wing? The old room? He asked, surprised. Hardly anyone goes there. That's why, Cinderella said, it needs to be ready by tomorrow. The servant nodded and left at once. A little later, Cinderella was back in the kitchen. Do you have time for something a bit special? She asked. The cook lifted her eyes. Depends how special. Something people remember, Cinderella said, but not too much. Then we must start right now, the cook replied, and not waste time. Cinderella smiled. I like that. As she walked back to her room, she thought quickly, what was still missing? What could go wrong? How could she do everything without the prince finding out? Good, she told herself. No time for hesitation. She paused, then added, and no need for unnecessary things either. Time was no longer just part of the day, it was part of the decision. Cinderella had just stepped out of the old room when she heard footsteps behind her. Cinderella, the prince's voice was suddenly very close. She stopped sharply. Yes, she said, turning and trying to look calm. What are you doing here? He asked, looking around. I don't see you in this part of the palace often. I'm checking a few things, she said. I decided it's time the old rooms were used too. The prince lifted his eyebrows. You've been quite busy lately. That's true, Cinderella replied. Sometimes things get arranged faster when there isn't much time. He smiled. You sound like you're planning something. Cinderella laughed, shorter than usual. You always think I'm planning something. Because usually it's true, he said. Just then a sound came from inside the room, someone moving a table. Cinderella glanced that way, then back to the prince. I have to go, she said quickly. I still have a few things to finish. All right, he said. We'll talk later. When he left, Cinderella let out a breath. That was close, she whispered. She went back into the room and looked around. Okay, she said to the people inside. We keep going quieter and faster. Everything was beginning to fall into place. There was little time left, and a few things still had to stay hidden. Cinderella was checking the arrangement when the cook hurried in. We have a problem, she said immediately. What problem? Cinderella asked, standing straight at once. The ingredients we ordered won't be enough for tomorrow evening, the cook said. Are you sure? I checked twice, the cook replied. Either we change the menu or we find more today. Cinderella thought for 1 second. Fine, we change the plan. What can we do with what we have? We can, the cook said, but it will have to be simpler. Simpler is good, Cinderella answered. We don't need extra. At that moment, the steward appeared in the doorway. They're asking if the room will be ready on time, he said. It will, Cinderella replied without hesitation. Just make everyone move faster. She turned to the people in the room. We have little time, she said. No room for mistakes. And if the prince comes here again? Someone asked. Then delay him, Cinderella said. Think of something. I'll handle the rest. She took a deep breath and added, This will happen. It just won't be exactly how we imagined. And then she understood something important. Sometimes the best surprises happen when the plan changes. The palace already felt different, as if tomorrow would not be ordinary. People moved from room to room, checking, comparing, whispering. Cinderella stood in the small room and looked at everything carefully. This table stays here, she said. And the candles? A servant asked. Fewer, Cinderella said. I don't want it crowded. The steward came closer. And if the prince decides to walk around tonight? Cinderella smiled. Then we keep him busy elsewhere. Someone will ask for his advice. Someone will talk to him. Good, he nodded. We'll take care of it. A court lady entered. Cinderella, do you need anything else? Yes, Cinderella said. Tell me honestly, does it look like something done out of duty? The woman looked around the room and shook her head. It looks like something someone wanted to do. That's what I needed to hear, Cinderella said. She stayed alone for a moment, sat down, and thought. Tomorrow, she whispered, just tomorrow. Then she stood and said aloud, Enough for today, the rest will settle. She looked at the room one more time and left. The plan was no longer only an idea, it was almost ready. Cinderella woke with the thought that had been sitting in her mind for days. Today, she said, and got up. The palace already carried a feeling that something would happen. People greeted each other more often than usual. In the corridors, looks were exchanged that said more than words. The prince entered the breakfast room and looked around. Everyone is acting strange, he said. Am I missing something? You're imagining it, Cinderella replied, sitting across from him. You have a lot of tasks today, don't you? He smiled. And I thought today would be a calm day, he teased. Not always what we think happens, Cinderella said. Sometimes the day has its own plans. He looked at her suspiciously. You're talking like that again. Because it's true again, she replied. Later the steward approached Cinderella. Everything is ready, he said. We're only waiting for the signal. You'll get it, she said, when the time comes. A court lady whispered. The prince is asking whether he'll have lunch alone. Tell him he'll have company, Cinderella said, rising and heading toward the old wing. Good, she told herself. No turning back now. At the same moment, the prince stopped by a window and looked outside. What an interesting day, he murmured. And it hasn't even started. Cinderella stopped at the door of the small room and turned to the prince. Before we go in, she said, promise me something. What? He asked. Don't ask anything until I tell you, she replied. He laughed. That sounds suspicious. But fine, I promise. Cinderella opened the door and stepped aside. The prince stopped. He went quiet. Inside there was no crowd, no speeches. This is, he began. He turned to her. This is for me, but I didn't want a celebration. I know, Cinderella said. That's why it isn't one. He looked around again. You remembered what I like more than anything, he said quietly. I didn't expect this. The idea was that you wouldn't, Cinderella answered. So that's why everyone kept me busy today, he said. Probably, Cinderella shrugged. He stepped closer to the table, then looked back at her. This is the best gift I've ever received, he said, because someone thought about what I would truly like, not what looks impressive. That's exactly what I wanted, Cinderella said. He nodded, laughing softly. You did it, he said. I admit it, I didn't expect it at all. It shows, Cinderella replied. You stood like you were nailed to the floor. Because I was, he said, and because everyone assured me nothing was happening. No one lied, Cinderella said. They just didn't tell you everything. He looked straight into her eyes. How long have you been planning this? Long enough to start wondering if I'd fail, Cinderella said, and short enough not to give up. So that's why you were so busy, he said. I thought you were avoiding me. If I were avoiding you, I wouldn't be here, Cinderella answered. I would have hidden much earlier. He laughed again. Do you know what the best part is? If you say the surprise, you're wrong, Cinderella said. No, he said. The best part is that you didn't try to impress me. You just know me, Cinderella. He leaned against the table. And now tell me something honest. Was there a moment when almost everything went wrong? There were a few, she admitted. One of them was when you almost walked into the room yesterday. I knew it, he said. I saw you and thought she's hiding something. I was, Cinderella replied. And it was worth it. The prince smiled now, no longer surprised, only warm. Yes, he said. It was definitely worth it. Later the prince leaned on the balcony railing and looked into the courtyard. You know, he said, if every birthday were like this, I'd wait for them impatiently. Careful, Cinderella replied. I might decide to surprise you more often." "That sounds like a threat," he laughed. "What's next? Secret plans every week?" "Only when it's worth it." "And who decides when it's worth it?" "Obviously me," Cinderella said, smiling. The prince laughed out loud. "Fine, I accept. But next time, it's my turn." "I want to see that," Cinderella said. They fell quiet for a moment, not because there was nothing to say, but because the moment was clear even without words. "I'm glad you didn't do something huge," he said after a while. "This felt real." "I'm glad you understood," Cinderella replied. "Because if you hadn't, I would have been upset." "Then that would have been a problem," he said, amused. Cinderella turned to him. "One day," she said, "we'll remember this birthday and laugh." "One day," he smiled. "I'm already smiling." "Then I did my job," Cinderella said. Behind them the palace grew quieter, not because everything had ended, but because the day had given what it needed to give. And tomorrow would bring new ideas.